Welcome. My name is Beth Hendricks, and I'm the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Colorado. The 104-year-old League of Women Voters is a political, nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in our democracy. The League works to increase understanding of major policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. Although the League advocates for issues after extensive study, it never endorses or opposes candidates or political parties. The views expressed this evening will be those of the candidates, not of the League of Women Voters. The League regularly hosts events such as this to allow Colorado voters to make an informed choice when filling out their ballot. Again, the League of Women Voters neither supports nor opposes these or any candidates. We hope that your time spent here will help you make informed decision on primary election day, June 25th, 2024. Tonight, the partners for tonight's forum are the League of Women Voters chapters from Arapahoe and Douglas counties, Larimer County, and Greeley-Weld County, the AAUW of Colorado, Colorado Community Media and their Douglas County News Press, El Seminario, KUNC, and Pro 15. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Matt Crane, the Executive Director of the Colorado County Clerks Association. He'll give us some information about this year's elections. Matt.
Thanks so much, Beth. I appreciate it. And good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Crane. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado County Clerks Association. I'm certainly excited to be here tonight for this important event. A few things to keep in mind as we approach this election, which certainly is a unique one, something that we haven't seen in Colorado for quite some time. Between the state primary election, which will have normal primary election ballot content, and then the congressional for vacancy committee congressional election, it certainly adds a unique layer to this June's election. One thing to keep in mind when you receive your ballot, you will see the primary election ballot, the content comes first. The normal primary election content will come first. After that, the congressional vacancy election content will come. And the reason for that is the statute is very clear about the order of contests in a primary election. All of that content has to come first, followed by the congressional vacancy election contest. So as you go through, please make sure that you vote all of the contests that you wish to vote on and keep an eye out for where that congressional vacancy election is. So if you want to vote in that specific election, you certainly don't miss the opportunity to do so. A few important dates for this election. Did you know the election has already begun? UOCAVA ballots went out on Saturday, May 11th to our uniformed and overseas military members. Ballots to non-UOCAVA voters are mailed beginning this Monday. Now, keep in mind, the post office doesn't drop them all at one time, and voters shouldn't expect them the next day. They tend to drop them in waves or deliver them in waves. So some people may get them the next day, and other people may not get it until the Saturday after. Our general rule of thumb is if you do not receive your ballot a week after they are mailed, so in this case, Monday, June 10th, that's when you should call your clerk and ask if you need to request a replacement ballot. VSPCs, our voter service and polling centers, will open for those of you who are in Congressional District 4, your VSPCs will be open Monday, June 10th. For those of you who live in a county that is not in Congressional District 4, those VSPCs actually open Monday, June 17th. And the reason for that is that Colorado law says a congressional vacancy election has to be run like a general election. In general elections, our VSPCs are open for 15 days. In primary elections, they're only required to be open for 8 days. So that's why we have those differences in the starting time if you're in Congressional District 4 or not. Of course, Election Day is June 25th. Ballots must be back in the clerk's hands in a ballot box, in a 24-hour ballot box by 7 p.m. on election night. Remember, postmark does not count. Also, please remember, if you're voting your mail ballot, please remember to sign your ballot envelope so that you don't want to have your envelope rejected for not signing your envelope. A couple of other things to keep in mind. Despite a lot of the things that have been out there to the contrary, we've never had all of our ballots counted on election night. There are a couple of reasons why, but the two most important reasons why are for our UOCAVA voters. Colorado goes beyond what's required by federal law to serve our military and overseas voters. So those voters can return their mail ballot, and we can receive it up to 8 days after Election Day, so long as it was postmarked on Election Day. And then if there was an issue with a signature on an envelope, it was a missing signature or a discrepant signature, or somebody was missing an ID if they were ID required, they have until 8 days after the election to cure that ballot. So there will be votes coming in all the way up until that 8th day after the election, and you can see totals changing all the way through that time. If you have any questions about the election process, please check in with the election expert in your county, which is your clerk and recorder. Our folks are more than happy to take as much time as you need to answer your questions about how our elections work and to tell you the truth about what's real and what's not. Finally, my last request is for those of you who have not yet done so or are not yet doing so, please join us. Sign up to be an election judge. It's so when people talk about elections and clerks, people tend to think that clerks are the great and all-powerful Oz behind a curtain controlling everything, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's our election judges who actually conduct the election. So it's your fellow church members, your synagogue members, your PTA members, your next door neighbor. These are the men and women who take the time, take the civic duty very seriously. They're the ones verifying voter eligibility, doing signature verification, tabulating the ballots. It's these men and women who are actually conducting the election. So if it's something you'd like to do, we'd love to have you join us in future elections. And if you know somebody that is an election judge, please make sure you thank them, because it has been rough sledding over the last few years with a lot of what's been going on. And these men and women continue to answer the call to serve their community and our country by serving as election judges. So they deserve our admiration and our thanks. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Beth, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity tonight. And good luck to all of our candidates who are on the ballot this year.
Thank you, Matt. We greatly appreciate your expertise and your partnership.
Thank you.
The goal of this forum is to present the views of the candidates seeking the office of the U.S. 4th Congressional District of Colorado in a fair, nonpartisan setting so that you, the voter, can make an informed voting decision. Before we begin, I'll ask you to listen as I review league guidelines for candidate forums that ensure that you have the most time to effectively hear from the candidates. All candidates have agreed with these terms of this forum in advance. This forum is not a debate. The purpose of this forum is to inform voters through respectful questions and listening. No campaign banners, signs, literature, T-shirts, or other campaign items will be allowed to be displayed. All candidates for this office have been invited to attend. The candidates will appear in alphabetical order by last name for introductory statements. The order will then rotate, giving each candidate the chance to answer first and the chance to answer last. Candidates will have 2 minutes for opening statements and 1 minute for closing statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to questions. In fairness to all candidates, time limits will be strictly reinforced by the moderators. Forum questions were solicited from league chapters and partner organizations and screened by a committee of league volunteers. Audience members may submit additional questions via the Q&A function. A league screening committee will review all submitted questions tonight for bias, duplication, proper decorum, and audience interest. Co-moderators are responsible for enforcing time limits, respectful engagement, and ensuring candidates stay on topic, and may interrupt candidates if they believe they are straying from the subject. They have the authority to mute candidates if they do not conform to the forum guidelines. According to league guidelines, candidate forums cannot be recorded, photographed, or broadcast without the explicit permission of the League of Women Voters of Colorado. No portion of the candidate forum may be used as part of campaign materials. Candidates may use notes, but no props of any kind are allowed. I will now introduce the primary Democratic candidates for congressperson to serve the U.S. 4th Congressional District of Colorado in alphabetical order. Tricia Calvarese, Ike McCorkle, and John Pedora. I will now introduce our co-moderators for the forum. Michael DiIoanna is editor-in-chief for Colorado Community Media, which covers 24 communities, including Douglas County and parts of Elbert and Weld counties. And Lucas Brady Woods is the government and politics reporter for KUNC. Lucas covers the Colorado Congressional Delegation, state legislature, governor, and government agencies. Before joining KUNC, he was the news director at KSJD, an NPR station in Montezuma County in southwestern Colorado. I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome, candidates. We will now hear your opening statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes to deliver their opening statements. Candidates will be called in alphabetical order, with the order rotating for each question. So, Tricia Calvarese, Ike McCorkle, and John Pedora.
All right.
And Lucas, we'll hand over to Lucas. I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll start. I'm sorry, just a confusion there. We'll start with Tricia. Tricia, your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much. The League of Women Voters has a critical mission to expand voting rights and ensure a representative democracy. Representative of the people who make our country run, who carry and care for our families and our communities. And let's be frank, that is disproportionately and overwhelmingly women. And at a time, at the first time in our nation's history, we are living with fewer rights than we had a generation ago. The Supreme Court overturned Roe, and with it, federal protection for reproductive freedom. We cannot take women's political representation for granted. My name is Tricia Calvarese, and I am a daughter of Colorado's 4th Congressional District. I was raised in Sterling and Highlands Ranch. My Douglas County public school education led to a full academic scholarship at the Johns Hopkins University. And I moved back home to Highlands Ranch from DC to provide end-of-life care for my parents. They both had cancer, and they passed last fall, days apart. I am running to protect the care and benefits our seniors earned and were promised. And I won the Democratic Ballot Access Convention and the Democratic nomination for the special vacancy election to fill the 6 months left on Ken Buck's term. That means I am already running against Lauren Boebert's proxy, Greg Lopez. He's not running in the primary. I debated Greg just this morning and last week on Conservative Talk Radio, where they invited me back to debate Boebert when we win the primary. But yes, I am running against 3 men right now, and at least one of my Democratic opponents colluded with a Republican firm to sue me to try to kick me off the ballot. It was an attempt to disenfranchise the people of CD4 of a choice. It failed, we won, and we have a poll that shows I am the woman to defeat that other woman, Lauren Boebert, in November. So I am asking for your vote twice in the primary and the special on one ballot. Again, they're due, June 25th. And thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Candidate Calvarese. Candidate Ike McCorkle. Opening remarks.
Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. We come together at a pivotal moment for our country when our democracy is under attack from extremism, and inept, dangerous leaders are threatening to pull us out of the NATO alliance, and a radical court has flung women's rights decades into the past. We must choose a candidate that is prepared to win in November. Our campaign is ready, funded, and staffed, and has the data to prove that we can win the right-leaning unaffiliated votes, that we must win to be successful in November. The latest poll shows that we are leading Lauren Boebert by 14 points because of the work that we have done, and we're the only campaign that's doing this. The balance of power in Washington could very well be decided right here in District 4, and we must take full advantage of this opportunity. I'm asking for your vote as a retired Marine, lifelong Democrat, proud father of 4 beautiful kids, and candidate that's run for 3 cycles in District 4. I'm running to protect our seniors' rights to live their life with dignity. Republicans have proposed cutting Social Security by a staggering $1.5 trillion and raising the retirement age to 69. The GOP's plan is to hobble the EPA, They refuse to address climate change, leading our children down a path of no return. Winning this election is a moral and an existential imperative, and we must win this seat so that we can federally protect the right to choose, address the climate crisis head on, and ensure that our children have a legitimate democracy that they can trust. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. I would be honored to earn your nomination again. Together, we can win this election and defend this nation and our freedoms that so many of my brothers and sisters have fought and died for. Thank you for having me. I would be honored to be your congressman. Semper Fidelis.
Thank you, candidate McCorkle. Candidate John Fedora, opening remarks, please.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm John Fedora. I'm a manufacturing engineer, an environmental scientist, an addiction recovery advocate, and a proud husband and father to 3 beautiful kiddos. I had the unique privilege of growing up both in Pennsylvania and Colorado. But I was born and raised in southeastern Pennsylvania, the grandson of a farmer, the son of a nurse and a carpenter. When I was just 5 years old, my father was diagnosed with MS, and we went from living the American dream to the American nightmare. With no income coming into our household for over 2 years, we were denied Social Security disability benefits twice. We survived by depending on government programs like SNAP, Medicaid, LIHEAP, the same programs that Republican extremists that are running for this seat are hell-bent on eliminating. For too long, the elite and the extremists in Congress have abandoned hardworking Americans, the very people my father always taught me that the government should be advocating for. That's why I've been politically active for at least the last decade. First in my anti-war efforts, then climate change advocacy, followed by criminal justice reform, and finally political advocacy, where I knocked on tens of thousands of doors in Pennsylvania for the Joe Biden campaign. Today, I'm proud to be standing before you to represent our great district on a platform of common sense solutions to unite us, all of us. That means defending women's reproductive and abortion rights, protecting our LGBTQ friends, gun safety reform, expanding access to affordable health care, and protecting our environment, as well as implementing common sense tax reform. I'm the only candidate here who's continually worked blue-collar jobs and knows the struggles that that community faces. I have the grassroots experience to flip districts even redder than CD4. While Ken Buck's retirement and Lauren Boebert's switch into our district has brought some national attention, I've been in this race long before those developments because I'm running for the hardworking people of this district. And it's not as easy as it has been for others, but fighting for a dignified and equitable government is worth it. I'm so honored to have some incredible endorsements from across the district, including the former state chair, Patricia Walk, the former state party chair, Howard Cho, Representative Mandy Lindsay, Representative Parenti, the Working Families Party, Progressive Democrats of America, and others.
John, John Fedora, your time is up. Candidate Fedora, thank you for those remarks. Lucas will now ask our first question.
Thank you, candidates. You will now have 90 seconds to respond, and order of candidates will rotate, as was mentioned. We'll start with candidate McCorkle for the first question. On what issues or legislation would you be willing to work across the aisle? And I'll repeat the question for each candidate.
I would be willing to work across the aisle on just about every single piece of legislation that there is, because it's absolutely critical to our ability to govern and actually set the legislative conditions that are needed to get investment back into our rural communities. So I've already been reaching across the aisle in Congressional District 4, and I have Republican support for my campaign, which is absolutely critical to our ability to actually win this election in the reddest district in Colorado. I've developed that name recognition and that fundraising base over the last 6 years of campaigning in Congressional District 4. So I would reach across the aisle and I would work with my colleagues in the GOP on passing the Farm Bill, which would include a federal right to repair, which would include a federal fertilizer and equipment subsidies assistance program so that our farming and ranching community, which is #2 driver of the economy in District 4, can be successful and can put food on their table and can have peace of mind. It's absolutely critical to reach across the aisle, to work on gun control, to ensure that schools like my son's school, STEM Highlands Ranch, is protected and secure so that we can be, as parents, have peace of mind dropping our kids off at school. My son Isaac Jr. was in class the day.
Thank you, candidate. Next, we'll go to candidate Pedora. On what issues or legislation would you be willing to work across the aisle?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm a huge fan of bipartisanship, but I'm not a huge fan of bipartisanship just for the sake of bipartisanship. And what I mean by that is we have one of the most dysfunctional and least productive Congresses in United States history. So finding allies in Washington, D.C. on the other side of the aisle is going to be a really difficult challenge. And that's because they don't want to give any of the credit towards the Democratic Party. They don't actually want to solve the immigration crisis. They don't actually want to solve climate change or the cost of healthcare, the elevated cost of housing, the economic issues that I'm hearing about every single day when I'm traveling throughout this district. I am 100% willing to work with our Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle with whatever issue that we have common ground on. I've just been disenfranchised to see how little they care about America and how much they care about their own political future and continually framing the narrative. I'm disappointed time and time again to watch them fail to even be able to uphold their congressional duties of passing a basic budget, of agreeing on a foreign aid package to support our allies in Ukraine or Israel. Just to reiterate and to kind of cap it off, I'll work with anybody on any side of the aisle for any common sense solutions that improve the lives of hardworking Americans, and that's a promise that I'll stick by.
Thank you so much. Candidate Calvarese, again, on what issues or legislation would you be willing to work across the aisle?
Absolutely. I am the only candidate in this race besides Lauren Boebert, who is actually in Washington, D.C., to see landmark legislation pass, including the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I am thrilled that I got to be a part of that at the AFL-CIO, where we worked with folks across the aisle. I would also, on the CHIPS and Science Act, that was also bipartisan. I worked on that in government at the U.S. National Science Foundation. I'll work with anybody to reshore American innovation and manufacturing so that we outcompete the Chinese Communist Party and that America, with our values, freedom, open science, reciprocity, are leading the world in these technologies. I think Ken Buck was doing some really great work taking on tech monopolies. I would love to pick that up. Water conservation, all the issues that matter to our farmers, making sure that we have resilient crops and that our producers have what they need to continue growing. Also to bring opportunities to the places that have been overlooked and left behind. Right now, the best jobs are concentrated on the coasts. We need more opportunities in places all throughout Colorado's 4th Congressional District, and I am willing to work with anybody to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will hand it back to Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. For our second question, we'll start with candidate Pedora. What federal measures would you support to create resilience to climate change and to protect Coloradans against its impacts?
So this is a tough one. I'm an environmental scientist. I have a background in climate change mitigation and geospatial technology, and I've studied significantly what we can do at the federal level to address the threat of climate change. The reality is that the oil and gas companies own America, and we don't have politicians that are willing to stand up to them. I live right here in Weld County, where so many of the employees here are employed as fossil fuel workers. Those folks are scared of losing their job. So whatever progressive legislation we pass to tackle climate change, we can't create an economic condition that hurts those folks in the process. We have to make sure that whatever we do not leave those fossil fuel workers behind, because that's what they're most scared of. And that's how we're going to continue to lose Democratic majorities throughout America if we push for policies that aren't in alignment with folks. There are many different things that we can do through the Farm Bill to address the crisis. And it really comes with just holding the oil and gas companies accountable, forcing them to adhere to the federal clean air standards, enhanced regulation, something that they lobby against time and time and time again, common sense solutions that they look at regulations as being a form of imposition that inhibits and lowers their bottom line. We need to actually sit down with the labor union, sit down with the gas and oil workers, sit down with the scientists and the big kids in the room, and come up with policies to address climate change.
Same question for candidate Calvarese. What federal measures would you support to create excuse me, I'll start again. What federal measures would you support to create resilience to climate change and to protect Coloradans against its impacts?
Thank you so much for that question. So I actually had the pen when the Biden-Harris administration closed the Keystone Access Pipeline. And our message was simple. Labor will lead the transition to the clean energy future, but it's not going to be on our backs. So there needs to be workplace protections in place before folks in the fossil fuel communities are phased out. Pipelines can carry lots of different things. So in addition to natural gas, which is part of the drawdown strategy, we should look at hydrogen. We can look at all kinds of other pieces. Right now, there is billions on the table in these different bills. And we need a savvy representative who's going to go find it and get creative to try to bring it back into our communities. Just one example, at the United States National Science Foundation, I was working in a brand new directorate, technology innovation partnership on something called regional innovation engines. Colorado and Wyoming were just awarded one. There's $80 million just for climate tech startups. So it's also about inspiring a new generation to become engineers in climate and to make those pathways into those good jobs accessible. Colorado has a ton of potential, and I'm so excited about it. So I'm really thrilled for the opportunity to run to try to connect the investments already on the table to the folks who need them in our communities who need them most.
Thank you. And candidate McCorkle, what federal measures would you support to create resilience to climate change and to protect Coloradans against its impacts?
Well, I've advocated for years, for a decade, for the standing up of the Work Project Administration and what used to be the Civilian Conservation Corps. But now today, my good friend and colleague, Joe Neguse, has stood up the Climate Conservation Corps. And I would absolutely and 100% work with Jason Crow and Joe Neguse and all my colleagues in Congress to get the Climate Conservation Corps fully funded. And not just the Climate Conservation Corps, but I would work to support NASA programs to build a hydrothermal plant at Yellowstone. And your question was specific in nature, and that it asked, what will we do to create resilience against climate change? And I think that means you're referring to the content and density of carbon and methane and P1 and 2 particles that are already in the atmosphere that are poisoning our families and our environment and that are creating human-caused climate change. And the way that we create resilience to the change that is already in the system, which is already dangerous with respect to our ability to continue to grow crops, to have reliable precipitation patterns and irrigation and water storage.
Sorry, your time is up. Thank you for stopping. Next question will come from Lucas.
Thank you, and thank you, candidates, for the discussion. Candidate Calvarese will answer first with our third question. Studies and reports show that the economy is strong with record unemployment and decreasing inflation, yet the average household is still struggling. What are your priorities to improve the economic conditions of everyday Coloradans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to take on price gouging. Target just dropped its prices on thousands of items. We need a congressional inquiry into looking at who's actually price gouging. Where can we lower prices? This is also, we saw this when there were the chips backups, right, of the threat to our supply chains by having those overseas, by reshoring American innovation, by making things here, making them locally, and creating local innovation hubs around certain technologies, we can lower costs. As it is right now, food is a luxury for my generation. Sincerely, the cost of food is skyrocketing. Why is that? Couple reasons. Number one, price gouging. That's a huge piece of it. Another big piece of it is the fact that Vladimir Putin is systematically starving the world. This is part of his weaponization of war and food. So he's not exporting fertilizer. There's an opportunity for our growers then to step up and to be producing more and to be exporting more food, frankly. So those are just a couple of pieces, and there's so much more we can do, but I don't want to go over it, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. And next, candidate McCorkle, same question. What are your priorities to improve the economic conditions of everyday Coloradans?
Yeah, my priorities would be to address the massive monopolies that are actually enabling the corporate elite to do what Ms. Calvarese was referring to, and that's to actually raise the price of goods beyond their actual market value by more than 50%. Over 50% of the inflation that we've experienced has come directly from just what she mentioned, which is price gouging. But the only way that we can tamp down on that is by enforcing antitrust legislation and by also passing a windfall profits tax and using that revenue to reinvest in the infrastructure, to reinvest in the mechanisms that actually get revenue into our rural communities and create opportunity, job opportunity in our rural communities. And so I would also support what I started to mention earlier as I was talking about agriculture. And I would ensure that we enforce antitrust legislation and we break up the big four meatpacking plant monopolies, and that we use that antitrust legislation and that windfall profits tax to tamp down on the excessive price gouging and profiteering that is being conducted on the backs of average blue collar working class American citizens. And I would work with all of our unions to get that done.
Thank you. Candidate Pedora, same question. What are your priorities to improve the economic conditions of everyday Coloradans?
Thank you for the question. The common denominator, I hear it at the doors every day, is just that the economy simply isn't working for working people. Greedflation and corporate monopolies have their boots on the neck of the American worker. So implementing economic policies such as increasing the federal minimum wage, implementing a progressive taxation system, regulating the big corporations to prevent corporate monopolies, getting Wall Street investors out of the housing market to lower costs, investing in infrastructure to create jobs. These measures all aim to support working class citizens and reduce economic inequality. We can prioritize and focus on the economic output of agriculture, which is huge in CD4, saving family-owned farmers by prioritizing them over the corporate monopolies in the Farm Bill. Implementing a federal right to repair bill and reducing taxes can also support their sustainability, promoting a fair agricultural landscape and preserving family legacies in farming and ranching. The bottom line is that progressive, populist policies are what's winning with Americans right now. People are tired of, the status quo in Washington. We don't see any movement on taxation system. The first thing I would do on day one in office is try to repeal the 2016 Trump tax cuts that didn't trickle wealth down to the bottom portion of Americans, but instead fed it to the billionaire class and enhanced their wealth even more. People are ready for a fighter in Washington, D.C., somebody who knows the struggles of what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, like 75% of all Americans are. And that's a commitment that I make to stand up for.
Thank you, candidates. Michael, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, our fourth question regards the urban-rural divide, which, as you know, is important to the congressional district, the 4th congressional district. What do you think is the #1 concern of your constituents who live in urban areas of the district? And what is the #1 concern of your constituents who live in rural areas? Candidate Calvarese, your answer first.
I think regardless of where people live, they care and they worry about taking care of their families, putting food on the table and keeping a roof over their house. And you know what? I've lived in rural America, very Pennsyltucky, as we called it, Southwest Pennsylvania, so far rural, and where I would come up to this conflict over and over again. And I've heard it in our rural districts too, and Sterling and all throughout the Eastern Plains. People are forced to make an impossible choice. Do you stay and you take care of your family? Or do you leave to find opportunity somewhere else? I mean, I even know for, myself, there's no 4-year university in CD4. So thankfully I had my scholarship. I left and I was able to come back home, but I want opportunities that meet people where they are so that people can stay, they can pursue opportunities, they can find ladders up that lead into the middle class without having to move away from home. And they can move back home if they would like to, and they can find opportunities there as well. But from taking care of the elder to also the younger generation, I feel for the sandwich generation again, and disproportionately, it so falls to women to hold it all together. So care and cost are two major, and opportunities, I would say, are the three major things I'm hearing.
Thank you. Candidate McCorkle, what do you think is the number one concern of your constituents who live in urban areas of the district versus the number one concern of your constituents in rural areas?
I think the number one concern that I've heard here in Douglas County, where 50% of the voting population in District 4 proper lives, is the skyrocketing tax on our homes and mortgages. And, it's the skyrocketing cost of groceries at the store. I've experienced this. I have 4 kids. My mortgage has gone up $500 a month because of these increases in property values and taxes. I think that when an American citizen gets into a fixed rate agreement on their mortgage, that they should not be priced and gouged out of their homes by increasing taxes. And so, I think we need to definitely address that at both the state and federal legislative levels. The number one concern of folks out in rural America is that Washington is broken. It's not functioning. It's not working for them. That means that we need to pass a Family Farmer and Ranching Legacy Protection Act so that family farmers and ranchers are not forced off of their land and out of their homes simply because they're elderly and they have gotten into a situation where they're living on a fixed income. We absolutely have to shore up Social Security. We have to scrap the cap on Social Security so that program is solvent, so that our seniors can depend on that revenue and live their lives with dignity. We absolutely have to make Congress functional. That is the number one problem that I hear from people all across America.
Thank you. And Candidate Pedora, what do you think is the number one concern of your constituents who live in urban areas of the district versus the number one concern of your constituents in rural areas?
Sure. Yeah, this is a great question. Regardless of where you live throughout CD4, the rising cost of living is something that I hear every day, whether it's small business owners, that can't afford their supplies, whether it's healthcare that's climbing astronomically, housing that's becoming inaccessible to young families or older, senior citizens that have been in their houses for generations that are having to leave because of rising property taxes, the climbing cost of essentials and groceries, and the threat to democracy. People are genuinely worried about a second Donald Trump term, about Lauren Boebert becoming their next representative, about the wave of Republican extremism that's engulfing our country. In the urban areas, what I've typically heard is that people are very concerned about the traffic congestion, about the suburban sprawl, about the lack of water infrastructure, and the rising property taxes. In rural Colorado, limited access to healthcare facilities. Folks driving an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours to the nearest healthcare facility, irradiated and contaminated water. There's folks in Fort Morgan that are paying $300-400 a month to have black sludge come out of their taps. That's affecting everybody. The economic conditions that people are experiencing are causing them to struggle. They don't believe in rural America that their voices are heard in the state or the nation's capital. They don't want to become urban areas with tech hubs. They want good paying blue collar jobs, and they want us to respect their rural way of life. So the urban and rural divide is a huge issue, and it's something that we're continually working on to address every day.
Thank you. And Lucas, now we move to the lightning round with Lucas.
Yes, thank you. So this is the lightning round where candidates will answer promptly yes or no questions. Remember, these are yes or no. So we'll move through these fast. The first lightning round question is, should the United States continue to offer military assistance to Israel in the war against Hamas? Candidate McCorkle.
Yes.
Candidate Pedora.
No.
Candidate Calvarese.
No.
All right. Next question. Should the United States continue to offer military assistance to Ukraine? Candidate Pedora.
Yes.
Candidate Calvarese.
Yeah.
Candidate McCorkle.
Yes, it's the same fight.
Remember to keep these to yes or no questions. Next question. Do you support any federal restrictions to abortion access? Candidate Calvarese.
Absolutely not.
Candidate McCorkle.
No.
Candidate Pedora.
No.
All right, our final lightning round question. Are US elections secure and therefore accurate? Candidate McCorkle,
Yes.
candidate Pedora,
Yes.
candidate Calvarese.
Yes.
Thank you, candidates. Back to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Lucas, and thank you, candidates. We'll now begin with questions from our audience.
We seem to have frozen. Michael seems to have frozen. So I will pick. Oh, here he is. He's back.
Sorry, was I missing there? Did you miss something from me?
Yeah, you paused briefly. Why don't we just start this question over?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll begin now our audience questions. Candidates have 90 seconds to respond, which is a little shorter than the 2 minutes that you had before. And we're going to start with candidate McCorkle first. The question is, what is your stance on the war in Gaza?
It's an extremely complicated situation. I have family in Tel Aviv, and we absolutely have to make sure that both Israeli and Palestinians, and every citizen of humanity for that matter, have what they need and they're treated with dignity and human rights. And we absolutely have to continue to support the Biden administration in their pushing the Israeli administration in the right direction, while at the same time ensuring that they have the supplies that they need, including Iron Dome, to ensure that my cousins in Tel Aviv are not killed. 6,000 rockets were fired in one day at Tel Aviv and Israel, and my cousins would be dead today if we did not provide that support. So we need a two-state solution where both Palestinians and we need a demilitarized zone in between, but we need a two-state solution where both Palestinians have the right to self-governance and they have the security that they need with respect to being separated from the arms supplies and shipments and terrorist armies that are being supported directly by the state of Iran. And so it's a complicated situation, but we need to ensure that Israelis and Palestinians both have human rights and are both protected from the terrorist armies of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the IRG.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Bedora, same question. What is your stance on the war in Gaza?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. For me, I look at what happened on October 7th as an absolute tragedy for the Israelis. But I've watched the aftermath of Israel's occupation and military conquest into Gaza, and it's completely goes against every international law that we have. We're witnessing genocide. Palestinians and Israelis have the right to peacefully coexist, and that's the bottom line. I believe that our foreign policy right now is basically an outdated approach. It fails to acknowledge the evolving American sentiment against perpetual conflict. Many Americans now seek a foreign policy that prioritizes peace, diplomacy, and humanitarian efforts over military intervention. So I do, until Israel meets the terms that we've laid out, I want to stop sending them weapons because I don't want the blood to be on our hands to slaughter innocent Palestinian women and children. I don't support increased funding until Israel stops killing those innocent people and allows the humanitarian aid to flow freely. An immediate ceasefire is crucial, followed by a global humanitarian effort to address the urgent needs of those affected in Gaza. So I advocate for renewed negotiations to broker a two-state solution, aiming to bring lasting peace and stability to the region. I think that this approach prioritizes human rights and diplomatic solutions, aligning with a contemporary American perspective on foreign policy and conflict resolution. I think that Americans are tired of business as usual, where the defense contractors make out the most and innocent people lose their lives in the process.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Calvarese, what is your stance on the war on Gaza?
Peace always has a place in every conversation. So peace has a place, right, in this discussion. And I just want to say, after having lost my parents just the thought of having a loved one held hostage is just like absolutely heartbreaking and devastating. And at the same time, the indiscriminate slaughter of civilians is absolutely unconscionable. You know, two things can be true at the same time. And just like Israel has a right to exist, the Israeli people have a right to exist, the Palestinian people have a right to exist. Palestine has a right to exist. I believe in a two-state solution. I do think Bibi Netanyahu is a strong man, so I commend the administration for finally stepping up to start to pressure him. I think there's a very hopeful labor movement in Israel that I want to encourage. But peace. And I think that what's happening on our college campuses, we need to be especially tolerant and welcoming of our Jewish students. They need to be protected on our campuses, and so does the right to protest. Again, two things can be true at the same time, and peace always has a place up front in every conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our next audience question, we'll go to Lucas.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with candidate Pedora on this one. What are some measures to address immigration issues at the border and within the United States?
Yeah, so for me, what I want to see is a less militarized approach on our border. I don't think that increased military presence is going to solve what we have, but I think that closing the porosity of the border, like actually going there and seeing how easily these people can come into the country undocumented and acknowledging that it's happening at an exponential rate is part of an American reality that we've avoided for generations. I think that both all administrations for the last 50, 60, 70 years have been passing the buck with no real solution to immigration. So what I would like to see is streamlined and expedited paths to citizenship to vet the people that are here, that have come here illegally, and vet them and make sure that they're not violent criminals and integrate them into our country because they're a crucial part of our economy, of our culture, and our community. But I do want to see us, tamper down on the drug trade, the fentanyl that's moving across the border. I want to see humanitarian approaches to make sure that we're actually addressing the reason why so many of these folks are risking their lives to travel through Mexican cartel territory to have their family immigrate to America. What type of conditions are they experiencing in South America and Mexico that are driving them here? And America can influence the trajectory of what happens in those countries. We can course correct that. We've funded programs in the past that have reduced the numbers of migrants that have come to America. So I would really like to see the streamlined path to citizenship. I would like to see us, deploy folks to the border to expedite that process, to screen them and background check them and make sure we let the good folks in.
Thank you, candidate Pedora. Next, candidate Calvary, same question. What are some measures to address immigration issues at the border and within the United States?
Well, first of all, I would invite that disruptive caucus in the House to go ahead and do their job and pass that bipartisan border bill. It was on the table. It was bipartisan. There was support, and it simply died because Donald Trump told a handful of folks in the House to say no. So I would say stop playing politics with this issue and let's actually solve the problem. You know what we could do? Pass an actual budget and go ahead and fund the Border Patrol instead of kicking the can down the road with these continuing resolutions. I also think we need more amnesty judges as well. But let me say this. Immigrants are a critical part of our economy, right? So I want to make sure that for the folks who are here who've been contributing to our society have clear pathways to citizenship, because as long as you can exploit people for their documentation status, it hurts the quality of work for everybody, and it hurts wages. It's bad for every working person in America. I also want to say we need to be expediting visas from partners and allies like India, where we're in a competition for talent, for STEM talent, and we need more engineers, we need more scientists, and they're either going to come here or they're going to go to China or Russia. So we need to remain a place that is welcoming for those folks, while of course lifting up our labor values. I would also want to look into the separation of families and if there's any children working in our meat packing plants, because that is not American values to use immigrant child labor in our meat packing plants.
Thank you, candidate Calreese. Finally, candidate McCorkle, same question. What are some measures to address immigration issues at the border and within the United States?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I would absolutely agree with my colleagues, and I want to thank them for running. But I would surge administrative funding and personnel to the border. I would support passing a comprehensive immigration bill that funds asylum judges and the border patrol and treats people with the humanity that they deserve, that doesn't separate families, and that provides clear pathways to citizenship, and that ensures that the farming and the ranching community that I've engaged with all over District 4. I've been out there and I've talked to them face to face for the last two election cycles. The Colorado Cattlemen's Association, the Stockmen's Association, the Corn Council, and they tell me that they need extended work visa programs and a more reliable workforce. And that comes from immigration. It's also responsible for, halving the inflation that we've experienced here in America. But bottom line, we have to win this congressional district in order to do any of that or protect women's rights or anything else. And so I would ask you to support my campaign, because if you want to pass a bipartisan immigration bill, we have to take this seat. We have to win our seat in the U.S. House so that we can go into our majority and pass a comprehensive immigration bill. And I'm the best candidate to do that.
Thank you, candidate. Back to you, Michael.
Yes, the next question from our audience for the candidates is, what do you propose to address rising housing costs in Colorado? We'll start with candidate Calvarese.
This is an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking it. We need to make it illegal for speculators like Redfin to buy up starter homes just to drive up the cost. That has got to stop. So that's a big piece of it. I would also say right now, there's not enough regulation on the book for these developers that come in. We don't know if they're solvent or not. And turns out they're not. We're seeing that a lot in Northern Colorado with some specific developments, which the bill gets passed on to the town, right? And that hurts everybody. So thinking creatively too, we have new ways to manufacture materials like 3D printing, where we can start to think about how can we lower costs of the manufacturing of homes itself. And of course, working with the labor movement about how can we maybe be creative in the way we're building our homes. But a big piece of it is the inventory. And we're also, thinking about how do we retrofit our currently existing homes so that they can be multifamily, because that's the reality is we have a silver tsunami. So people are having to retrofit their homes to adapt to more people living in them anyway. So there you go. Those are a couple.
Thank you. Candidate McCorkle, what do you propose to address rising housing costs in Colorado?
Yeah, I've actually had, one-on-one conversations excuse me, with my good friend Joe Neguse about this very issue. And I agree with him, and we've talked about working together in the next Congress and passing and extending and expanded the low-income housing tax credit. Federal credit that incentivizes developers, to build more affordable housing units. We absolutely need these all across rural Colorado, in the communities that dot the Eastern Plains and the Eastern 21 counties. We must also continue to hold the lenders accountable, for the mortgage contracts that Americans are signing, and ensure that there's a fair playing field. And I would work with the state legislators on a fair tax system at the state level, a property tax system that would not raise people's mortgages in unmanageable ways. Furthermore, I definitely believe that we need to evaluate and increase the minimum wage based on the cost of living in the districts and communities where our constituents are purchasing their food, their fuel, and paying their mortgages.
Thank you. And now we move to our next audience question. Lucas.
I didn't get to answer that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we back up a second? I'm sorry. Candidate Pedora, same question. What do you, I apologize. What do you propose to address the rising costs of housing in Colorado?
Sure, no worries. Thanks for looping back. I'll make sure that I champion economic policies that help Coloradans afford the cost of living, especially housing. I support offering subsidies to first-time home buyers, expanding the FHA lending program with more lenient lending policies, and giving families the first choice in buying homes over the corporate investors to help mitigate Wall Street's influence on our housing market. In 2008, when the financial collapse happened, the supply and demand was affected greatly because all the Wall Street investors came in and they gobbled up all the foreclosed homes. The same thing happened during the COVID housing boom in 2020. Housing is a basic human right, and it's something that we need to take a holistic approach to look at. I'm talking with folks every day that are in their 30s, their 40s, that are trapped in a permanent renters economy, because they've been paying $3,000 a month for the last 4 or 5 years. But then when they go to get a $3,000 a month mortgage, the bank tells them, oh, no, sorry, you can't afford it. So one of the things that I would really like to see become standard practice is your rent payments being reported accurately to the credit bureau to help you build that credit so that you can go out and meet the minimum lending requirements for home ownership. We know that home ownership is the #1 path to economic security and building wealth within your lifetime. And that dream, that American dream, has moved too far out of reach for too many for far too long. So I will fully prioritize addressing the housing crisis when I get to Washington.
Thank you. And now we move to our next audience question with Lucas.
All right. We'll start with candidate McCorkle on this one. Access to affordable health care remains a national problem. What are some measures to enhance access and reduce costs of health care?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's extremely critical. In fact, I don't know if you guys know, but it's about 60% of bankruptcies annually come directly from unpaid medical bills. And so in the same way that the Biden administration is going about forgiving student debt, I think that the federal government and the Congress in particular, but we need to retake the majority in order to do this, needs to pass a bill that would provide relief to American citizens that are being forced out of their homes and that are experiencing bankruptcy due to nothing more than the price gouging in the medical system. And that means the cost of prescription drugs and the cost of emergent medical care and the inaccessibility of preventative daily medical care. So I would support, a single payer Medicare for all healthcare program, and at the same time included in that legislation, because it's the most fiscally responsible thing to do, and it's the best thing to do, and it's the morally right thing to do for patients, not profits. And so I would support a bill that would reduce the burden that our seniors, for instance, experience when they have an accident or an illness and are forced into a situation where they can no longer afford their mortgages and housing.
That's your time, candidate. Thank you. Next, candidate Pedora, what are some measures to enhance access and reduce healthcare costs?
Sure, this is a huge issue, and I hear it around the district every day. I was shocked to learn this year that 70% of all healthcare costs are administrative only. We need regulations in place to stop that in its tracks to drive down the cost of healthcare. I believe in the goal of achieving Medicare for all or a single-payer healthcare system. I believe that it can provide comprehensive coverage and reduce overall healthcare costs. However, I'm also very open to supporting and championing any legislation that effectively lowers the cost of healthcare for working families. This could include things like expanding Medicaid eligibility, negotiating prescription drug prices, increasing funding for community health centers, promoting competition among healthcare providers to drive down costs. Additionally, investing in preventative care and addressing the root cause of health disparities can lead to long-term savings and improved health outcomes for all Americans. It's my priority to ensure that all individuals and families have access to the affordable quality healthcare that they need and deserve, because I believe that healthcare is a basic human right. I have 3 young children, and I pay $25,000 a year out of pocket to make sure that my family has health care coverage. And that's not including our dental, that's not including our vision insurance. That is simply unsustainable and out of reach for so many Americans. Health care and housing can't be luxuries that only the rich can afford. and I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to lower the cost of healthcare, whether it's single payer or enhanced regulations to reduce healthcare costs for all.
Thank you. Candidate Calvarese, what are some measures to enhance access and reduce costs of healthcare?
When my dad was diagnosed with kidney cancer, they didn't give him very long to live. But there was an amazing drug, Inalida and Keytruda, the combination of it, and it gave us 4 more years of his life. Without his union bargained benefits, those drugs would be something like $20,000 a month, beyond what we could have afforded. So if we didn't have that insurance, I would have lost 4 extra years that I had with my dad that I will value for the rest of my life. This is something that the Inflation Reduction Act achieved. It makes it so that Medicare can now negotiate directly with drug companies to improve access to some of the costliest but most effective drugs. That's something Lauren Boebert voted against. So I want to make sure that we can negotiate those prices down for our seniors. And you know what? In fact, speaking of Lauren Boebert, recently she had a medical issue, and she was talking about it, of how she was able to text a doctor and then drive into care when 2/3 of our district doesn't have access to that same exact care. So if we can get the internet going, right? Let's make sure we have rural internet. Accessibility to telehealth could be a potential option. And we need maternal health care. We need maternal health care if we're not going to continue the brain drain and our communities on the Eastern Plains falling apart. We need accessible maternal care, meeting people where they are.
Thank you very much, all of you. Back to you, Michael, for the next audience question.
Yes, and this is our 5th audience question. It asks, what is the most important overall issue facing CD4? And we'll start with candidate Pedora.
This is always such a difficult question because, I have numerous conversations every day and every week with people, and from one day to the next, I feel a little differently. I'm split between economic policy and kitchen table issues, because everywhere I go, people that earn 6 figures a year are being choked. The middle class is being stamped out of existence. And that's why one of my campaign policies is to rebuild, renew, and re-engage, rebuild the middle class, and renew the American dream. I read statistics the other day that said something you need to earn about $174,000 a year as a family of 2 with 2 children to be able to even be considered middle class. So people are telling me I can't afford my supplies, I can't afford my healthcare, my housing, my groceries. That's something that we need to get under control, or else the American dream is going to be out of reach for everybody but the financially elite. I'm split between that and defending our democracy, because none of those economic policies will even matter if Donald Trump gets a second term and comes in and guts our democracy and we turn into an authoritarian dictatorship. So to me, those are the biggest issues right now, is we have to save democracy and we have to make America affordable for everybody and welcoming to everybody. So it's a big holistic approach, but we need to sit down and focus on those kitchen table issues and make sure that we're electing the leader of the free world that'll actually maintain our American democracy, our imperfect democracy, so that we can continue to implement policies that uplift working families. So I know I kind of answered it 2 directions, but it's dead split for me.
Thank you. Candidate Calvarese, what is the most important overall issue facing CD4?
Families. I mean, people care about their families. They care about the right to plan when and if they're going to have a family, when and how they're going to expand their family, access to the care they need to take care of their families. Family, right? Of also wanting their children to have economic mobility. Mine was the first generation where we're looking at a potential backslide, and we can't let that happen. This is America. This is America. People should always be able to rise on the merit and their hard work and dedication. So bringing opportunities, more pathways into the middle class that, again, meet people where they are in their communities. That is a huge thing. And more time and making it easier to take care of the people they love, of their families, both the aging population and the young one. We need more accessible childcare, elder care, and again, maternal care and reproductive access.
Thank you. Candidate McCorkle, what is the most important overall issue facing CD4?
I would say that the most important issue facing Congressional District 4 is also the most important issue facing our country. and it's how we deal with the second Donald Trump presidency. As you know, he's ahead in the polls, and it's very possible that he could win the swing states and the Electoral College. And let me tell you, if you have Donald Trump as the president, you want somebody that has some sort of national security experience, that has relationships on Capitol Hill with folks in the Secret Service, with folks in the Defense Department, with people in the special operations community, because we swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, to take that obligation freely with no mental reservations or purposes of evasion, and to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which we were about to enter, so help us God. So we have to defend our democracy against those domestic threats that they face. Absolutely, families are important to every single citizen in District 4. The cost of living is important. Immigration is a huge issue. Extended, work visas and labor programs so that our ranchers and farmers have the labor sources that they need to actually support and pick their crops and provide our food. But democracy is the #1 issue on the ballot.
Thank you. And I hand it back to Lucas.
All right, this concludes the questioning portion of our forum. Thank you all for your answers. We will now hear the closing statements from each of you. Each candidate now has 1 minute for a closing statement, starting with candidate McCorkle.
Oops, sorry, I was getting unmuted. Thank you guys so much for putting this on. If I have the honor of being your nominee, I promise that I will fight and that we will win against these extremists who sought to overturn a free and fair American election. The same extremists who handpicked the Supreme Court and stripped away rights from women all over America. This decision made in the primary will not only impact the citizens of Colorado, it will determine the fight and whether or not we win the fight against these MAGA extremists who threaten our democracy, that so many of my brothers and sisters and Marines died defending. We must send leaders to Washington who will fight for real practical solutions, unite America around our shared values, and fight for the democratic principles that we all cherish. I can and I will win this election, and I will be that representative. Thank you so much. I was honored to speak to you this evening, and I appreciate you guys putting on this forum. God bless.
Candidate Fedora, 1 minute.
So in conclusion, thank you to the League of Women Voters and all the sponsors tonight for getting us out in front of voters. It's not always easy. This district is huge. There's a lot of confusion this election, but I've been basically running 2 different races. I ran in a race when I was running against Ken Buck, and another when Lauren Boebert stepped in. The goals don't change. The end result is to defeat extremism and inspire hope within our communities. And this race is about bringing people together, about uniting people from different political backgrounds that disagree on quite a few issues. I received a message today from a Republican-leaning independent voter in Strasburg who reached out to me and told me he read through my website and he thought that I was somebody that he would get behind because it seems like I care. He seems like I have empathy. People are tired of the status quo in Washington. The era of governance by the financial elites and the millionaire class and billionaire class in Washington, D.C. is coming to an end. And whoever the Republican nominee is, our campaign's ready to take them on and inspire hope within our communities.
Thank you. Candidate Calvarese, 1 minute.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you this evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, Beth, Matt, Michael, Lucas, KUNC, Progressive 15, Douglas County News Press, El Seminario, AAUW, our audience. You guys should become election judges. I'll just tell you, before my dad passed, he was a lifelong Republican, and he told me, step up to serve the community that raised you. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm endorsed by Phil Weiser, former reps Perlmutter and Markey, Representative Brittany Pedersen, HE43's beloved Bob Marshall, Brianna Titone, Holly Baca, the United Mine Workers of America, and more. Please join them. Vote for me twice, both in the special vacancy and the primary. There is no one working harder in this race or who will work harder for you in Congress. My name is Trisha Calvarese. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I will hand it to Michael to finish things up for us.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. This concludes tonight's candidate forum. We hope all attending were able to learn about each candidate for this important position and will cast their ballot in an informed and confident manner. A big thank you to each candidate for taking their time out and their willingness to serve our beautiful state. Now, I hand it back to Beth Hendricks to close it out.
Thank you, Michael and Lucas. We appreciate your time and expertise in moderating this forum. The audience may now applaud. Thank you also to our partners, AAUW of Colorado, Colorado Community Media, KUNC, Pro 15, and El Seminario newspaper, as well as the Leagues of Women Voters of Arapahoe and Douglas, Greeley-Weld, and Larimer counties. Thank you also to the many volunteers who gave their time and expertise to make this forum happen, especially Barbara Winnery, Carol Ayers, Jerry Cummins, Barbara Dungy, Kathleen Milligan, Patty Neckenchek, Michael Neckenchuk, Jill Smith, and Kathy Wilson. Thank you to the audience for your interest in attending this forum. We applaud your efforts to inform yourselves. The League of Women Voters would like to remind those attending this forum that the views expressed this evening are those of the candidates and not of the sponsoring organizations. Some of the positions expressed here may be considered opinions and not facts agreed upon by experts. We encourage all voters to learn more and to do their own research to get factual information. Vote411.org is your best source for voter information. It points you directly to the candidates and issues you'll be voting on with information about your voter status and more. If you haven't received your ballot by June 12th, please contact your county clerk's office. If you need help finding who your county clerk is, please go to the League of Women Voters of Colorado website, lwvcolorado.org, to find that information. Please join us next week on June 5th, Wednesday, June 5th at 6:30 p.m. for a virtual forum of the Republican candidates for CD4 presented by this same group of partners. Please check the League's website and social media for more information. And remember that we vote by mail in Colorado. Ballots for the primary will be mailed out beginning June 3rd and must be returned by June 25th at 7 p.m. You may leave your ballot at a designated drop box or a polling center, or return your ballot through the U.S. Postal Service. If you choose to mail your ballot, please be sure to mail it before June 17th and verify that you have the appropriate postage. If you need help finding a drop box or polling place, vote411.org can help. For 104 years, the League has been empowering voters and defending democracy. We're not slowing down anytime soon. Please remember that you are the ones who make democracy work by making your voice heard. Please vote every election. Thank you and good night.